because that way we can share it with other people who couldn't make it because of time zones. Thank you all for coming. I wasn't sure if anybody would be interested in doing it, but as I say, my autumn calendar that theoretically had got rescheduled workshops has all fallen into either people not wanting to do things safely, or I've got another session that has also been cancelled because the guilds run out of funds because they've had 18 months with nobody going along to members. So my autumn set of workshops have disappeared into a smoke, and everybody's sort of getting weary of online, but at the same time kind of going, oh, I don't know if I want to go back to in person. But I thought this might be a nice thing to do, taking a look at some different spinning wheels, why I like them, how I came to own them, and hopefully a few people might also have a wheel that they feel like, even if you can't show it to us, if you show what wheel did you buy, why did you end up buying it. So I've got 2 cameras on the go. I've got the big laptop because that'll do sensible recording, but I have also got my phone set up on the call. So I am going to send that one through to Spotlight. And sorry, we're going to have some slightly dizzy camera work, but it will all be worth it. So I'm going to start off with this one, which is, this is the wheel that I always used to take with me going out to workshops. And this is my, oh, it's still working. My screen just went blank, which is a bit alarming. This is a Woolmakers Bliss, and Woolmakers are the same company who make Louet. It's like a subdivision of the same company over in Holland. I don't know if we've got any Dutch people here, but Louet make kitchens. So you can have a kitchen made by the same people who we know make spinning wheels. And this is the same stuff that it's like kitchen worktop and kitchen cabinet. So it's like this formica finish. So it's laminated ply, and then it's a textured sort of plastic that's attached really firmly onto the surface of it. So it's really nice and durable, really nice and hard wearing. I chuck this in the back of the van, and it regularly ends up falling over in the back of a car park or coming out of the van not in the position that I put it in, and it has been absolutely bomb proof. It's nice because it's got an orifice, so if any of you've done any of the spinning workshops, this generally is the wheel that I'm often using. It's got an orifice reducer that I can't pop out with one hand without it going really badly wrong, but this little white insert comes out if you need a larger size orifice. The pre-Brexit, it wasn't too tricky to get the bobbins at all. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. But yeah, and the same goes for buying it, because you can only buy it direct from Woolmakers. There's no intermediary, which is why it's quite a nice low cost wheel. And it comes in single or in double treadle versions. I've got the single treadle one, which is actually wide enough to put 2 feet on. So it's a nice versatile option for somebody who kind of might want single treadle or might want double treadle, because that treadle plate is so nice and wide. The only thing about it is that the treadle's quite high up off the floor. So this height here, because of the way that it's made, where it's laser cut out of this formica plastic, in order for that part to be strong enough, what ends up happening is that this treadle is raised up quite a long way, and that means you do need a slightly higher chair to sit and use it with, otherwise your feet end up with your knees raised up much too high. So that's the lowest cost wheel that I've got. It's the only wheel that I've ever bought that's brand new. Every other wheel that I've ever owned has been second hand. But it's when somebody always said to me, what wheel shall I get? And I haven't got a very big budget, but I don't want to wait for a second-hand wheel. And I want a castle style, which is this upright one. It's one of my recommendations that they have a look out for. It's got 4 ratios, so it goes from 18.5 to 1 all the way up to 4.5 to 1, which is a really nice, versatile. You can spin just about anything with those ratios as an option. And it's just on a stretchy polymer drive band. And I've now got the Scotch tension bit. So it's Scotch tension as well. It's a magnetic flyer. So to change the bobbin, this part just pops off, and built into this part here is a little magnet, and there's a locating pin on the end of there. And what that lets you do is that it holds, it's just a single shaft poking out the front. It doesn't need a flyer support at the front. So that makes changing a bobbin really nice and quick and easy. And then when you want to put it back together, that goes onto there. And if you just turn the flyer separately to there, and that click noise, it's now locked in place with the magnet holding it onto the flyer shaft. So it's a really nice way of quickly changing bobbins. So if you know you want to change bobbins a lot, that's a feature to have a look out for. And it's something that's in common with a lot of the Louet wheels. These bobbins are the same as the ones on the Victoria, the S10C. They're all interchangeable because it's all being made by the same company. So that's my only new wheel, and is my basic bottom end wheel I take to workshops that I am utterly non-precious about. If it breaks, it's not a disaster. The next wheel we'll have a look at. And by the way, if you've got any questions, please either do shout or stick them in the chat section. Interruptions are absolutely fine and positively encouraged. So this is the next one I thought we'd take a look at. And this one is a Schacht matchless. And one of the nice things about Schacht mattresses is that you can tell how old they are. And you can tell how old they are because if we spin this around to the back, okay, and we take a look here, on this bit here, now it's not quite light enough to show up, and I don't entirely think we're going to be able to see it anyway because I don't think it's going to come through very clearly, is where you will see a date. And that date will usually have a year on it, and it will tell you how old this wheel is. So this one, I happen to know, was made in 1988. So it is, oh, I'll stop wobbling my hand about. It's nearly as old as me. I was born in 1985, so it's the same age as my younger brother, in fact. So I think for a contemporary wheel, that's pretty good going, that something's got to the age of 36 and it's still being used regularly, and you can still get spare parts for it in exactly the same way. The same is true of wheels like the Ashford Traditionals. But it's really nice to see that there are still modern wheels being made that actually are lasting relatively well and are heading towards being antiques in their own right. The Schacht mattresses, they come with a variety of drive options. I might just move. So I'll stay here a minute. So they come with a few different drive options. So at the moment I have it set up in Scotch tension. So that's where the drive band is going to the pulley wheel and it's the bobbin that's braked. So I did the video last Christmas where I showed you about how I set up all my wheels with cleaning them and everything. This isn't the original brake band material. This is crochet cotton and then an elastic band, because I'm forever breaking springs and they're expensive to replace, and elastic bands are free. So this is set up in Scotch tension. You can also set it up in double drive, so where you take, this is a poly elastic drive band, but if you take a string drive band and it goes around twice, and I'll show you a double drive wheel later on, and that's where the drive band goes on the whirl and on the bobbin. So both are being driven by the drive band, but they will be turning at different speeds. It wouldn't work very well with this whirl because this is the fast high-speed whirl that's attached onto it, but it would work with the one that I've got stored on the back, because you need this end to be of a similar size to the whirls that you're putting it on. And that works because the two different surfaces slip at slightly different rates. So in order to get yarn winding onto a bobbin, you need the bobbin to be moving at a slightly different speed to the flyer. So they can be a little bit more fussy in the way that you set them up. Some people swear by double drive. I don't like using it much. I'd much rather use Scotch tension, but some people really, really like it. The mattresses come in single or double treadle. So this is the double treadle model, sorry, the single treadle model, but again, it's wide enough that you can put both feet on it. So there's a lady who, like my spinning guild, who is an excellent spinner and spins vast quantities at vast speeds. And she has a single treadle Schacht, and she always treadles it with both feet on the treadle working at the same time. I tend to treadle mine with just one foot. It works, both work equally well. The double treadle one is also an option, but I am a firm single treadle person because I've got one dodgy ankle, and that means that I can spin for longer without ending up with ankle fatigue and pain in that ankle joint. And even with double treadle, it just doesn't like it as much. This is, in terms of changing the bobbin, it's via this black knob here. And if we undo that, and that then has to flip forward, that all then has to come off. And I have no idea whether I can do this one-handed. You then need to pop this whirl off like that. Once you've popped that whirl off, you can take the bobbin off, and I've got so that's now in a position to put new bobbin on, and you can then put it back together again in the same way. So it's a little bit fussier than changing the bobbin over on, for example, that easy spin, because you've now got your drive band and your Scotch tension that have been both come off. So you've got to sort of finagle all that back in place, which is one of the reasons why I don't like using it so much in double drive, is that every time you change the bobbin, you have to completely set up the drive bands again, and they never quite go on in quite the same way. I have to spend ages doing the fresh adjustments. So that's that wheel. That's another one that I bought secondhand, but you can get them new. They're not cheap, but they are relatively solid bits of kit, particularly since they changed the manufacture of the drive wheels. Because these older drive wheels, they are made in 4 pieces. So there's a joint there. Where's the other joint? Hiding. There's a joint there. So the drive wheel was made of 4 jointed pieces of wood. And sometime in the mid 2000s, they changed. So that instead of being made in 4 pieces, I can't remember if it was 8 or if it was 6, and they changed the jointing method. And the wheels, there was a batch of wheels that came into the UK that had massive issues with the drive wheels splitting. And Schacht are made at quite high altitude in Colorado, and it's incredibly dry there. And what was happening is they were coming into the humid UK, and because wood is a natural material, it changes. And what was happening is that the wood was absorbing the moisture in our relatively moist atmosphere, and these joints were opening up. And there was a huge batch of drive wheels that basically all had to be replaced, and they've changed the design since, so that there's now, when you look at them, there's a couple of pegs on either side of those joints there, and that makes things much more stable. So there was a batch where there were some issues with the drive wheels coming apart slightly. They still spun all right, but it was just like, for a wheel that you're paying £800 or £900 for, this wasn't less than ideal. But as far as I'm aware, they fixed that issue with the newer ones. So that's the Schacht matchless. I'm just going to put this down a minute while I fetch the next one over. Okay. So this one is the one that is the wheel that I'm always asked about sort of most, I would say. And I'm asked about most because it's the most unusual looking of all my wheels. It's actually a German wheel. It's made by a company called Voltas spinrad. And if there's any Germans here, I truly apologise. My 1 year of high school German was not sufficient to prepare me for dealing with German spinning wheel manufacturers. And it's an unusual wheel that I can't quite work out why no spinning wheel manufacturer like Schacht or like Ashford has seized upon the design, because I think it's ingenious for all of us who are living in modern houses with limited spaces, multiple hobbies, where we're sharing things with other people. And it's got two drive wheels, and it's an accelerator wheel. Now, anybody who's in the UK might have heard of timber tops wheels. And timber tops were made by a person called James Williamson, probably about 40 years ago now. And it was then sold on to, the designs were then sold on to a company called Woodland Turnery, who are no longer making wheels. But he also had an accelerator wheel in this same way. And they're seen historically. But all the issues around wanting a nice big drive wheel, because the bigger your drive wheel, like on this wheel here, the easier it is to get a fast turning wheel. That's why we like big drive wheels, is that they develop a lot of momentum. So it becomes easier to spin fine yarns for longer with less effort. But the bigger you make this drive wheel, the more expensive it is to make, the harder it is to make, the harder it is to transport, and the more space it takes up in your customer's home. This gets around this issue by using an accelerator. So it's double treadle, and when the treadles turn, these treadles are attached to a crankshaft which rotates this wheel here. This wheel here has a drive band which goes up to this axle here. And when this axle turns, it turns this smaller wheel on the back, and it's that is connected to the flyer. So you gain all the advantages of a big drive wheel without having the space, because it's like a car's gearing system. So this wheel here, by that turning round, means that this drive wheel turns around at a much faster rate because of the gearing ratios that are on here. So it's a very clever solution to how do you end up with a small footprint wheel, but you want it to spin quite nice and quickly. And this is a very, very stable wheel to sit and spin on. It's very, very nice and quiet because all the bearings are sealed. It's very light to treadle because you're only treadling relatively small drive wheels. And you can see how slowly this drive wheel turns around in comparison to this one that's at the back. And that gives you a very, very fast flyer. So it's a great design that I'm not quite sure why anybody's not seized upon. The Majorcraft Aura, you can get accelerator heads for the Majorcraft Aura, but they don't quite work in exactly the same way, and they require buying on a bolt-on extra, and it's like an attachment that attaches up by the flyer rather than a true accelerator wheel. You can get, like, it's called, I think it's the overdrive head, I think Majorcraft call it. And it's similar but doesn't quite work in the same way, and I don't think it's quite as elegant solution. But other than that, it looks very like a Majorcraft, and he does make other wheels which aren't accelerated that basically look like a Majorcraft wheel, that have this relatively small drive wheel, because that's one thing the Majorcrafts all have, and I don't own a Majorcraft wheel because they're all double treadled by default, is they all feature this relatively small drive wheel located quite low down. And that's something this manufacturer does. He doesn't make this exact wheel anymore. I don't know whether it was too fiddly to make or too expensive to make, or there just wasn't enough demand for it. But I think it's a really, really clever, elegant solution. The bobbin comes and the flyer come apart in a similar way to the Majorcraft. So it's a knob that holds onto here. So this one's called, Steph's asked what's the name of this wheel. It's made by a company called Voltas spinrad, and they're a German company. They have a website that you can order from, but it is a website that you can order from, and you then have to send payment by bank transfer, because they're the same company who I bought my skein winder from. So it's quite a normal way of doing things in German, but for those of Germany, but for those of us who do e-commerce where we pay by card or PayPal, it seems a bit weird. And this wheel, this model's called the Crazy Ella. And as I say, he doesn't make this one anymore, but he does make other ones. But if you've got contacts in Germany, it's worthwhile exploring. When I'm no longer holding onto a phone at the same time, I will pop the link into the chat section so that people can have a look at it. So to change the bobbin, there's a knob that comes off, and then the whole fly mechanism has to come off. But with this one, it is a screw-on whirl. And if you've never come across screw-on whirls, if you're only used to the push-fit ones, the thing to remember with them is that they generally unscrew the opposite way to the way that you think they should do for tightening and loosening. They tend to be right-hand threaded. And it was a traditional thing to do with how much time you spent spinning versus plying. But I've never had any issues with one coming undone. So that's a screw thread on there. And then the whole thing comes off. And the other really nice feature about these ones is that the bobbins have got built-in bearings set into the end. So this part here is actually got a proper seal bearing in it. So that's one of the other things that makes it a really nice wheel to spin on, because it's incredibly smooth. And technically you don't actually need to oil it because of those seal bearings, but I still oil it because it just helps to keep some of the noise and rattle down sometimes. But those seal bearings set in the end make for a really, really smooth spinning experience. So let me just pop that back on there. And as you can see, they're a really nice snug fit onto the flyer shaft. And that's another one of the things. It means that there's no rattling or there's no rattling when the bobbin doesn't quite fit precisely on the spindle shaft. Right, let's go and get that. Let's go and fetch the oldest wheel. Which is this one. So this is my grand old lady. I'm going to turn the phone, there we go, that way, so you can see how much more space this takes up. This is not a wheel that you can fit into a small house, and this wheel is a Norwegian wheel. They were made round about the turn of the 1900s-ish. There were a lot of wheels made over a long period of time where it's hard to say, they're all made to the same design. It's hard to put a precise date on it. And a lot of them, they were basically bulk shipped over to the UK round about the time that the spinning craze really started to take off here, which was about the time of the Good Life TV show. So during that 1970s period, when that self-sufficiency, interest in crafts was really taking off. And in recognition of the fact that the only real mass market spinning wheels available in the UK at that point in time were the Ashford traditionals. And somebody must have cottoned on to the fact that over in Scandinavia, there were a lot of really old wheels like this one that were coming up on estate sales from the older spinners who were using them dying, and they were being put up for sale. They were really, really common, and they were coming over almost by the container load. In the period, it wasn't necessarily containers, but people were going over and filling up vans and coming back over on the ferry with huge numbers of wheels that were all of a similar type to this. We see a few variations, but they all basically have the same rough layout. I had somebody say to me, "Oh, it's like a Canadian production wheel." And it is, but it's nowhere near as big. So the drive wheel here, if I put my hand there for scale, the drive wheel is about 21 inches. So it's nice and large, but it's not quite as unwieldy in a very tiny, tiny house as a full-on Canadian production wheel, where on a Canadian production wheel, the drive wheel would be another 3 or 4 inches in all dimensions, if not slightly more. They're enormous. A friend has got one. There aren't many in the UK. They are really basic materials. They look like they're really, really something quite posh, and they're not. So this here is pine. I know it's pine because this one, when I got it, was not in pristine condition, so it had to have a bit of work done on it. These spokes have become really, really loose in their seatings here, and what that meant was that this whole frame was wobbling every time you treadled it, which is a bit less than ideal. So the whole thing basically got taken apart, and these parts got re-wedged, which basically meant I had to sand it back down. And underneath this dark coloured stain, what we've actually got is just bog standard pine. It's nothing fancy. And I suspect the same with these. It's a very, very light wheel. Even though it's quite big, you can easily sort of pick it up and tuck it under one arm. And this one runs in double drive. So what that means is that we have one continuous drive band loop, and it goes, yeah, got tangled up in the German wheel, and it goes, one end goes onto the bobbin and the other end goes onto the whirl here. And can you see what I was saying when about we were using the Schacht matchless, about them needing to be in quite comparable, similar sizes? Because if they're not too close enough in size, you end up with the yarn being pulled onto the wheel really, really firmly, because you only want a slight amount of slippage rather than a lot. I am not 100% convinced that this is the original flyer that goes with this wheel, because it's not actually the best fit. And when we look at it, the drive band doesn't actually completely line up with where the whirl sits, and we've got quite a big gap going on here, and as a result this thing has quite a lot of movement. So it may be that this isn't the original flyer, and it's not quite the same colour or the same wood as the rest of the wheel, but it does work. It's quite nice for sitting and spinning on. As you can see, manoeuvring it round, it's not the easiest of tasks. It's quite nice for sitting and spinning on when you want some quite nice effortless treadle. But what it is, as you can probably hear, is it's noisy. It gets better with regular oiling and regular usage, but because that flyer doesn't fit perfectly in here, it always moves backwards and forwards slightly. And because it always moves backwards and forwards slightly, you always get that faint hint of a rattle. And the same with the bobbin itself. So every time it's moving, you just get these faint hints of rattles. And it only has the one bobbin. My dad does some bits of wood turning, and he did make some more for me. But making bobbins is actually, it's a harder skill to get them perfectly centered and not more rattly than you might think. So they're okay and they work, but they're less than ideal. But they're still nice wheels. If you like lace spinning and you really fancy having a wheel with a lovely big drive wheel that gives you that added momentum, you can pick them up on eBay here in the UK for about the £100 mark. They're not expensive, but you might have to be prepared to do a little bit of work like I did, where you've got to be able to fiddle about with, this upright's loose. So I had the whole thing apart, drove in wooden wedges underneath to tighten it all up again, sanded it all off, and made it all nice and neat again. So I've got one more to show you of spinning wheels. Let me put that down again. And I am getting a bit dark, so come around here. Which is this one. So, sorry everybody, we're a bit spinny turny roundy, and we have now got a herd of spinning wheels going on in the house. So this one is the wheel that I used to spin an awful lot on, and it was the wheel that I used as an art yarn wheel, and it's called an Easy Spin, and it's another wheel that was made about back in probably the 1980s, and it's actually made of Iroko. It is really, really heavy. Picking it up by this handle up here, you can barely do it with one hand. That makes it very, very stable and very, very sturdy. It does have these cutouts to push the weight out towards the edge of the drive wheel, which is relatively small, and it has a built-in weighted drive wheel. So this metal part here, that's actually a metal weight that's put in, so that if you let go of that wheel, that metal bit will always spin towards the bottom. And what that means, because of the way that the treadle is attached, when you get to the top of the wheel there, the treadle is flat on the floor and the weight will turn over and will help get the wheel over that dead spot. So if you've got a wheel that you're always really struggling with, it stalling at the top, you can do what I've done on my matchless here, is that if you just take yourself some low denomination coins and you can just stick them on, and this is blue tack, which we have in the UK, wherever you are in the world, there's sort of temporary wall adhesive that you can just peel off and peel on again. So these do come off here and can be stuck back on again, and you can just clean off any residue that's left from once you've left them sticking there for a while. And it does just help give you that momentum for a wheel to get over the surface. But the Easy Spin wheel was marketed as being easy to spin on, which is a blatant lie, because it is anything but easy to spin on. When we did a proper wheel speed dating session with my guild members, this was one of the wheels that most people sat down on and went, oh, it's dreadful. And then after they spent about 10 minutes with it, they went, oh, this is interesting. So one of the things that, because it has a very heavy drive wheel, the treadling mechanism is particularly odd, and it's pivoted quite oddly as well. I changed the hooks to these big L-shaped ones. I hold it there so that you can see slightly better. This is one of the reasons why I said about we can't be getting, once it starts getting too late, I don't have good enough lighting in here to be able to do really good clear video. And what that meant is that all the sort of crazy art yarn inclusion wheels with art yarn inclusions with tails and beehives and things, they won't pass the hooks without them getting caught. And this wheel has an unusual flyer mechanism, and it doesn't technically have an orifice. It's a form of delta orifice, and basically it means you can slide the yarn in and out of this loop here, so that if you want to bypass the orifice, you can do. So the yarn sits in there like that, and if you want to just move it out to get a large inclusion past, you can just hook it out the way. And then that comes on there, and the whole flyer slides off, and the whole bobbin slides off as well. So it's an intriguing bit of history, an intriguing beast. Not many, huge number of them got made, but there are quite a few lurking about here in the UK. I need 2 hands to put that back together. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different spinning wheels that I've got in my possession at this point in time. Let me just turn off that video. Okay, remove spotlight. There we go. So in my time, I have also owned, the wheel I learned to spin on was an Ashford Traveller, which is the wheel I think that has the greatest misnomer of a name ever, because it is a nightmare to travel with. Because the legs stick out at horribly awkward angles, the flyer flops, the whole mother of all flops over at the most inopportune moment. So yeah, it's a relatively compact wheel, but it's not a nice wheel to travel with. So that, and I wanted something that would go a little bit quicker as well. So that got passed on to another new spinner. and I had an Ashford traditional for quite a long period of time, which is, they're really nice wheels. There's loads of them here in the UK, so you can always get spare parts for them. I swapped it over to the sliding hook flyer to give me a bigger capacity bobbin, and that was nice to use, but it took up quite a bit of space, which at the time that I didn't want, which in hindsight, given the 5 wheels that are currently surrounding me, seems slightly ridiculous. But yeah, so that was the only other wheel that I've ever bought and sold. And apart from that, every other wheel I've ever bought, I still have in my possession. They've bred, but they are not allowed to breed any further. There's a potentially a wheel possibly needs to depart, but I can't quite probably this easy spin one here because I'm not spinning on it at the moment. But part of me thinks, but if I got into spinning lots and lots of art yarns again, I'd really miss having that one. So for now, it's staying on the basis it doesn't take up anywhere near as much space as some of the others. So those are all my wheels. So who's got something different to anything we've seen and fancies sharing anything about it? Remove spotlight off me. Anne, I know you're here. Anne, what wheel have you got? I'm going to pick on you.
Well, my favourite wheel is the Magicraft Rose.
Yeah.
That was my retirement wheel. When I retired work, I used the gift money I had then, and I just do really. It's my go-to wheel, really. It's the one I can just sit there and comfortably spin on. I've got a Pippi, which I really like as well, basically because Angie bought a Pippi. You know, Angie from Ashfield Guild.
Yeah, yeah. So Pippi are a New Zealand wheel for anybody who's never encountered.
Yeah.
They're sort of they're the ones that are similar-ish to a Ashford Traveller. Is it that?
No, it's not a castle wheel. It's one at the side.
Right.
But I can go and fetch it actually. Would you go and fetch my Pippi? Okay, it's going to fetch it.
Wheel courier deployed.
It is just very, very pretty, but it doesn't travel very well. I usually break something on it every time I take it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite funny you say about Majorcraft, because I think you're either in Team Majorcraft or you're in not Team Majorcraft, and I am firmly in the not Team Majorcraft camp. I've spun on a Rose. I've spun on what's the one with the green wheel?
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
The Susie.
I've spun on the Susie.
Yeah, I don't like
the Susie Pro. I've spun on the and I have another name, like what's the one with the teeny
Aura
wheel? Pardon?
The Aura?
The Aura, not the Aura, the one that they market as the travel wheel.
Oh, the little gem.
So the
little gem.
The little gem, yeah. And there's something about the treadle mechanism that I find really odd. It feels like my feet are kind of flapping around, and it just doesn't do it for me. I find it most weird.
Every time I go back to it, if I've spun on something else, I go back to that, and I just love it. It's really nice.
I think for some people, they are the wheel that they absolutely love spinning on. They've got one thing about them is they've got really quite expensive here in the UK. It's that whole shipping transport costs. The exchange rates haven't done very much good, and I think the manufacturing costs have risen quite a lot as well. But yeah, they're definitely a wheel that some people absolutely adore spinning. The little gems are one of those wheels that when I have them on people, when I'm teaching people in workshops, there's something about them that seems to encourage treadling at breakneck speeds. And that I don't think I've ever seen anybody.
Oh, bless him. He's brought it. Hold on.
As I have when they're sitting spinning on a little top of the feet and kind of almost moving. There's a blur. It's like we're doing something new of I know it's only got a little drive wheel, but you can slow your feet down slightly. It will really, really help. And sort of they'll slow down a bit, and you come back 2 minutes later, and their feet are going at the speed of light.
Actually.
Oh yes, that's wild. That's really similar to the Haldane, the Haldane Lewis.
Yeah.
It's got that kind of, which would sort of make sense because of the Scottish immigration that happened going into New Zealand, of taking those sort of traditions with you. That kind of, this is the wheel I was sort of familiar with using at home, and when you're over there, you copy what you've already got. Which I think sort of was one of the things that happened with the Canadian production wheels and the big Norwegian and Scandinavian wheels we see. The immigrants that went over to Canada took their same wheel ideas and principles of what they liked in a wheel with them, which is why they look quite similar, but you can upscale it even further than they did in the Norwegian ones. Martine has said she has got a Kromsky Sonata, which is one that I have not. I don't think I've ever owned a Kromsky. In fact, I know I haven't ever owned a Kromsky. My mum owns a Kromsky Fantasia, which she really likes. Why did you end up with a Sonata, Martine?
Quite a few people at the Mid-Essex Guild that I belong to have got them, and I love the way it folds up and fits into a bag, because I don't drive a practical spinning car, I drive a sports car. So when I first started spinning, I bought an Ashford traditional online, which my husband, bless him, painted bright pink and lime green for me, and I used to go to Guild with it, seat belted into the passenger seat, and the wheels spinning as I stopped at junctions. So we decided that it was going to get damaged, so I tried theirs, and I actually quite like using it, and I love the way the whole front folds up, so the whole thing is kind of flat, and then it fits in a bag, which technically, if I were a little taller, I can put like a rucksack on my back, but my husband nearly had a heart attack laughing because I put it over my shoulders, and it was like looking at a child on their first day at school with their teenage brother's rucksack on the back and it just flopped. But yeah, but I've had it for about a year. It was my 60th birthday present from the family, so it's probably the only new wheel I'll ever have.
Which reminded me of a wheel that I have forgotten to say that I owned, is that I owned an Ashford Scholar. Now, the Ashford Scholar was the pre-runner to the Ashford Kiwi. And again, it was another wheel that I bought second hand and stripped back and refinished because it was in a bit of a sorry state. And the front treadle entirely flipped up. It was single treadle. And it meant that it had basically the footprint of a piece of A4 paper, which was fabulous.
So this is a bit bigger than that, but it's really compact. And it just lays flat in the back of my car. So it's perfect because I don't have a practical vehicle. So.
And I think Ashford discontinued the Scholar at about the same time that they developed the Ashford Joy, because if you've got the Ashford Joy, which was your expensive travel wheel, and you've got the Ashford Scholar, which is your cheap travel wheel, people would not choose to buy the very expensive one that you've spent an awful lot of time developing. So they stopped making it. But interestingly, the Kiwi that they've just introduced now features that exact same feature, and the treadle folds up in the identical way to the Ashford Scholar used to work. So it's clearly something that they've recognised that actually is really helpful for people managing to either travelling with them or just not taking up so much space in their homes.
I did as well. I tried a couple of people at Guild had got there was a Kiwi that I tried, and I tried a Joy. But the other thing I liked about the Sonata is it's actually a bit taller, and I found that the orifice is just a little bit higher, and I found it easier to feed into, and I didn't find myself bending over as much. It's quite a nice height.
So for some people really find that height matters on the wheels. I've never found that it matters too much, but I think in part of that is if it's double treadle, you end up having to sit quite front onto wheels. Whereas because I generally spin on single treadle wheels, you can fidget about and have your hands in all sorts of positions, and you don't get trapped into that feeling that you need to be completely aligned in the same way. But some people find that it's something that they really can't wrap their heads around, to have their hands at a different height to the orifice, in which case finding a wheel with an orifice that you like. And sometimes it's nice to be able to see the bobbin as you're spinning onto it, because it reminds you need to change the hooks.
That is the only trouble with it. And somebody at Guild, he's actually created a little mirror contraption that he's got on the back of his, so he can see in the mirror.
Clever idea.
Yeah. Right, Ellen says she's got an Ashford Joy and she's got an electric eel wheel nano. I think we might do this again, and we'll do electric wheels then, if that's all right. Because I think it would be nice to do this again, because I've got 2 e-spinners that I haven't talked about, and I have spun on it. I did own an electric eel wheel very, very briefly. So if we might do this again, and we'll do electric wheels then, and to why people chose them over treadle wheels and similar. But why did you end up with a Joy, Ellen?
I'd gone to a spinning workshop. I'd just been spinning on a drop spindle, and she had a range of wheels to choose, and I said, I'll do it on the Kiwi, because I knew that it was the cheapest and probably in my price range. But by the end of the day, I was realizing that it wasn't the most comfortable for me to treadle. So she said, well, try all the others. And I sat at the Joy, and I was just like, oh, this feels like a dream in comparison. And I'm a shorty as well. So I'm only like 5'2". So the height really suits me. I can definitely see that it would be a bit low for taller people. And at the time I was just like, I'm living in a flat. It's a shared flat. I can pack it away. I don't think it's been in its bag more than twice, because it just lives out in my flat. But it doesn't take up much space, which is very helpful.
Yeah, somebody who lived in my knitting group when I lived in Sheffield, she got a Sonata actually, and she had it so that she could pack it up for exactly the same reason. And the issue she had is probably the opposite of you, Martine, is that she packed it up in its bag, and it meant she never got it out to spin on it, because every time she thought about spinning on it, she was like, oh, I've got to put it all together again.
Mine's never in its bag, unless I'm going to Guild. It lives out now.
Yeah,
and it has got a friend as well at the moment, because I've borrowed one from the Guild, and I'm hoping nobody wants to borrow it for a little while. And it's an old one. It's a Crumpstein Mazurka.
My mum owned a Mazurka. It was the first wheel that she bought after I got her into spinning. So yeah.
Yes, so that's the first time I had to play with a double drive.
Yeah.
And actually it's quite nice, considering it probably hasn't been, it was left to the Guild by somebody who died. And I don't think it had been used for years, and it's been shoved in and out of cars and cupboards. And considering that, actually it's pretty good.
Yeah. We've had a few of those, sadly, coming into our Guild recently, of our the Guild was set up in 1978. And a lot of the very, very early members are sadly either having to give up spinning. Some of them have had to move into homes, sadly, and it was sort of going, so all these old, and sort of going, it'd be really nice to keep them all. And I'm just sort of going, oh, it would be lovely to keep them all, but who's storing all of these wheels?
That's why I've ended up with this one, because there's no room in the cupboard.
Yeah, well, we don't even have a cupboard. We've got
a cupboard.
So my dye studio is our equipment storage, instead of me just going, two wheels. We can keep 2 wheels if we keep this one, which was the other one that's got to go. So yeah. Right, Jazz had put in the chat bits that she's got 2 of the different electric eel ones. I think we'll do a whole session on electric wheels and their pros and cons and all the huge numbers of different ones that are going to be available, because I think that would be fun. Steph's got an Ashford Joy 1 double treadle. Are you there, Steph, or you've had to dash off? Steph's picture. Oh, yeah,
no, I'm here. Just had to get rid of the camera because the hubby's walking around in his dressing gown. Didn't want to be seen.
So how did you end up with the Joy?
Well, I actually started off with the Ashford traditional, but I ended up doing myself quite a bit of harm. My posture must have been all wrong, spinning twisted. So I ended up needing physiotherapy for my shoulder, because my shoulder blade ended up coming out the top of my shoulder. It was quite a mess. Yeah, so once I'd got better, I decided I wanted something where I could sit directly straight and in front of the wheel and keep my posture good, which is why I went for the Ashford Joy, as well as Ellen said, it's really nice and compact, and you can even if you just fold the treadle up, it takes up so little room just sitting against the wall.
Yeah, it was one of my very, very long to-do list is to do a posture and seating and seats and what chair to use whilst spinning video, but it's kind of one of those things that is forever shunted to the bottom of the to-do list, because there's always something that I kind of go, need to do this first, because this is something that I'm actually being paid for, as opposed to something that would be nice to do. But it is on the list, maybe this autumn at some point in time. But it is one of those things of some wheels really don't agree with people in terms of the posture that they end up developing whilst they're using them. Jeanette's got a traditional and a traveller, which I suspect is nice, Jeanette, because it means you can swap and change your bobbins between the two.
Yeah. I actually started off with a Bliss.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get my head around it. It was my first wheel, and no. I sold it, and I really wish I hadn't now, but I did. And the reason why was, so my mum spins, and it's her traveller, so she always said that I would inherit it when she dies, and we have conversations like this all the time, so it's not as morbid as it sounds. And she decided to stop spinning, so she said I could have my inheritance early. So I got that offer. And in fact, it's as old as you are, Kate.
Yeah.
85 that she got it. She actually got it when we lived in Shetland. So she learnt to spin from a load of Shetland ladies. And I think I don't ever remember, neither does she ever remember me being taught how to spin. We decided with spinning and knitting, I just learnt by osmosis through her.
Yeah.
And because I had her wheel off her, when I got stuck, she could tell me what I needed to do.
Yeah.
So, and also I didn't like the double treadle. I'm a single treadle person.
Yeah, I think it's what people who spin on double treadles just sort of look at you like you're a bit. I was like going, no, the single treadles, they're really comfortable.
Yeah,
I do like being able to fidget in front of the wheel and just be able to just sit.
Yeah.
And I like the feeling of having one foot on the floor.
Yeah. And then we've got a caravan down in Borth.
Yeah.
So I drive past your house. Well, I don't drive past your house actually, because I don't know where you live, but
you probably do drive past my house, because we are
very regularly every weekend. So I keep because my traveller is sentimental, I keep that one at home, and I keep my traditional down at the caravan. So I don't need to. My traveller doesn't need to travel.
Yeah. they are not particularly friendly.
I often sit there watching over the Cambrian mountains, spinning on Cambrian fibre.
Right, who is that one? Carleen has chimed in with an enormously long list, which is she's got more than me, so I'm no longer feeling like the overachiever. She has got a ladybug. So a ladybug is technically it's the model down from the Schacht matchless, uses the same flyer, it's the same bobbins, but it's a plastic formed drive wheel instead, in a very pretty shade of red, and they only make it in double treadle. There is the Sidekick, which is the travel version thereof. A Peacock, which is another New Zealand one. Colleen, am I right?
Yep, it is.
Yeah, and I think that's another one that's sort of come out of that same kind of stable of wheel types from the New Zealand immigrants that would have taken away in their ideas about what a spinning wheel looks like. Two Major Craft Roses, one of which has got the overdrive on. Have you got that one to hand, Carleen? So that, because we talked about the overdrive and the similarity, it doesn't matter if you haven't.
Can I share the picture?
Yeah, of course.
It says you've disabled screen sharing.
Oh, hang on. Let me turn that on. All participants. There we go. That should be on now. So there's it's.
So can you see this?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we can.
So those are my two Magikarp Rose wheels side by side, and I have a jumbo flyer on the one on the left, and then the overdrive bobbin on the one on the right.
Yeah.
And the overdrive bobbin is humongous, so it's really hard to get the impression that it comes out further than the treadles. Like it when you try to sit down at the wheel, it's really difficult. It's easier to sit down and then pull the wheel towards you.
Yeah, you sort of got to tuck your legs underneath it. So the Magecraft ones are another one. They have, like the Delta Orifice, like I showed you on my easy spin, that they allow you to unhook your yarn as you're spinning it if you want to bypass the the orifice to get something wound onto it. So yeah, that's really interesting to see. Thank you, Carleen. And
this is another one of my wheels. So this is a bulky spinner, and the orifice is like bigger than my thumb. My thumb fits in there, and it's not touching anything.
Yeah, I think sometimes they were historically known as, and I'm not entirely sure this would be a very, you will see them being referred to as Indian head spinners, and I don't think that's the right way to refer to them anymore. But if you're browsing around on the internet and reading articles from 10 years ago, and I don't know if that's what they're still known as, because
so now they try to use the term Cowichan spinners now.
Yeah.
So that was the Indian tribe out in BC. And they made these sweaters with these bulky singles, and they would spin them on a wheel like this.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anybody ever sees reference to an Indian head spinner, that's what it means. But it's one of those, the generic Indian term is just really it's a horrible phrase to be using to describe what's actually relatively specific to a very, very specific group of people who live in a certain area of certain area of Canada, and the Cowichan people, they'd make beautiful textiles. Are they the ones that had the species of dog which was bred for producing fiber?
Yeah, they also raised a woolly dog that they used to make woven blankets. And they spent more than a year making a single blanket. Like, it's a very involved process with the spinning and the weaving. Yeah. But once the settlers arrived, the dogs died out.
Yeah, they've lost through interbreeding and disease. And sort of it's really sad, really, because it would be fascinating to see what it looked like. Is that the peacock?
This is my peacock, and it had damage to it. So as much as you say you love single treadle wheels, this one has a clunk. And so it was very not fun to spin on, because you'd be spinning silently and then all of a sudden it'd be clunk, clunk, clunk with every treadle. So I actually turned it into an e-spinner. So my husband 3D printed a block and we mounted a motor on it.
Yeah.
And I use a foot pedal like a sewing machine. So I have this foot pedal that I can use. Mm-hmm. And then I can, slow down or speed up, and you can change the direction you want to go just by flicking that switch.
Yeah.
So it's much nicer. But the peacocks were wonderful. They have really large bobbins, and so the amount you can get on a single bobbin is quite wonderful for a small wheel, because it's a very tiny thing. It's very hard to see scale here, but it's quite short.
Yeah.
They were designed to fit in the boot of your car.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and what's the Rogvaldsen one?
Yeah, so this is my latest wheel, and it's an Icelandic design. The person who made these wheels, his family immigrated from Iceland to Canada in like the early 1900s, and he started making these wheels in the 1930s. And eventually he had 8 children. 4 of his sons made wheels, and they've all passed away. So no one's making these wheels anymore, but it's a Canadian Icelandic wheel.
Yeah. So, and a Canadian production wheel. So you've got the grown-up version there of that compared to the one that I showed you. So hopefully people can see from that picture what I was saying about how my Norwegian wheel might look like it's big, but the Canadian production wheels take that scale and kind of add an extra magnitude of enormousness on them to it. So, but you can definitely see the heritage on how one probably evolved from the other, because there's just certain bits about it that are so similar in the way that they're laid out and designed. Yeah, a friend has got one, but it's not in fabulous working order, which is a pity, because I'd love to spin on a proper one nowadays, but there's just not that many here in the UK, because it's reliant on people bringing them back when they move home, they move over from Canada, and choosing to put one in the stuff that comes over in the sea freight. So
well, it is a big commitment of space.
Yeah. You've kind of got to be willing to sit and be wanting to spin for quite a while. And a Lynn Black mud river spinner, which is one I definitely heard of before.
So that was this one.
Oh, that's that one. Yeah.
Yeah, the Indian head.
Yeah.
So these were, mostly produced in the 70s and 80s. So again, the maker doesn't exist. I assume he's passed away. But he and his wife made hundreds of these every year for 20 years.
Yeah. So, and Anne's also said that she has got a herring, which is another one of those ones that relatively common for us here over in the UK. You'll see quite a few herrings, and they look like a really modern contemporary wheel, and they're bent plywood. There we go. And let me spotlight you, so that people can see it. And they're really nice little compact little wheels. And it's all, as I say, bent plywood, pretty much all of it. And they were made really common, I think, during the 70s. And the herrings had quite a large stock of them. I don't think they're making them new anymore, but you can still get hold of bobbins for them. And they're nice little things to spin on, actually. They're surprisingly compact for a traditional structure wheel. And they are, they're interesting little things. Again, it's that whole difference between UK size houses compared to Canadian, lots of other places, is that all of our wheels tend to sort of all go for, how much smaller can we make this? So, but yeah, Martine said, has anybody ever used a charker? I have got a tiny little charker that was built off some designs that were in spin-off ages ago, and somebody bought some of them, used that design and set up to make them, and they were called cigar box charkers, and it's a really tiny little compact one. And to be quite honest, it's a bit too light and weight and flimsy. I've used it and I've sort of vaguely spun on it, but everything's all a little bit slippy and it needs some tinkering with it. And I've not quite got the time and energy to sit and mess about with it enough to make it work really well. And I have spun on a Bosworth, it was one of the Bosworth charkers when I was over at Rhinebeck Sheep and Wool a few years ago. Of the person who was teaching a spindle spinning class also bought one along for us, and that was like chalk and cheese compared to my little cigar box one made out of toy wheels and various bits and pieces. I went, oh yeah, this actually works. So yeah, they're interesting things. They're very good for spinning short stapled fibres very, very, very quickly. So has
you do my little double flyer one?
Go on then.
There you go. That one was actually given to me. Am I the wrong way round?
You are.
Can you see it?
No, I can see your face.
Can I do it that way?
No, it was still on your face.
It's frozen.
Oh, I've got a moving, but I've only got a face, not the wheel.
Is that better?
No, it's still only got you, not the turn your camera around the other way, I think.
The wheel's in the thumbnail for me.
The wheel's there at the top now.
Oh, hang on. Right, yeah, you're here twice. It's because I've spotlighted the wrong one.
Yeah.
There we go. That'll do the trick.
Yeah.
So these double flyer ones were really common over in Europe, quite often in Holland, Belgium, do see some of them in Switzerland, and they were quite often used for spinning flax, because you can spin flax with 2 hands. So when you've got dress distaffs, if you're good enough, you can pull down the thread from your distaffs with both hands. I can barely do it with one, but I have seen this. There's a lady called Amanda Hannaford here in the UK, and I have seen her spinning on one. And I can see how it would, if you're very good, it would speed up production, because that was the whole aim of them, was to make spinning quickly, sort of, so you could spin more yarns, one treadle. And they were, at one point they were thought to be gossip wheels. I thought it might be 2 people sat side by side, and it probably really wasn't. So that one treadle, one drive wheel, and attached to that drive wheel 2 sets of drive bands, one which power each one of the flyers independently. And I think half the battle is getting the drive band set up to the right tension so that both flyers are actually working properly. And once you've got that, you're golden. But I find it sometimes hard enough to get one double drive flyer hitting that sweet spot. Getting 2 double drive flyers both working perfectly sometimes seems like it's an absolute impossibility. But they quite often show up in antique shops and charity shops and things, because they seem like, they look like a proper spinning wheel, that people quite often use ornamentally, as opposed to one of the more modern styles that are just a sort of a bit, they look like tools, whereas these look like decorative objects. And quite often Anne's has got one bit of it on there now, which is like a white bit on the end of there. They were quite often highly decorated with bits of porcelain or bone, likely to have been ivory, because that would, even back then, that would have been far too posh and expensive. But they're like these little white highlights on all the ends of the little knobs. And they are very nice looking little things. But yeah, most people just tend to just spin on one of the flyers rather than on both of them, because they are quite fiddly. Has anybody got any wheels we've not talked about, or would like to share any of their wheels that they've owned? We all good? I hope you've enjoyed it. I've had fun talking about my spinning wheels. I've had fun seeing some wheels that I've not seen before, or wheels that I've kind of only seen pictures of and never chatted to anybody who's owned one of them. I think what we'll do is I will have a look at my diary again, and we'll maybe have another session in probably a month or so's time, and we'll maybe have a look at some e-spinners then, because I think that would be fun, because they're one of those, there's more and more of them on the market. I say I've got 2. There's a few people here who've chimed in that they've got an electric wheel, electric eel wheels, and I think that might be an interesting thing to have a look at, and to hear them spinning as well, and to hear why people ended up with one model over another model, and why they've bought electric wheels either instead of a treadle powered wheel, or in addition to their treadle powered wheels. So I'll take a look at my diary, and we will see what we can do about arranging another one of those, because particularly as the nights are drawing in, I've got less time to be out spending in the garden, so I've got a bit of time I can spend in the evenings doing these sessions. Right, I will hit end on the call. The recording will get all saved, and I'll sort out uploading it when I get the chance. I've got fibre to pack tomorrow, so I shall probably set the computer to do all the processing whilst I'm busy doing other things, so that you can either look back on it if you think, what was it that she said about? But as ever, if you have ever got any questions, please feel free to ask them at any point in time. Always happy to answer. Or and I'll also, if you think, oh, so when somebody's asking about a wheel, I remember we talked about it, you'll be able to share the video link onto them and go, we talked about that when we did a little bit of a speed dating session with the Fellowship of Yarn. So I'm going to hit end now. It's been lovely to see you all and spend my Tuesday evening with you. I hope you've enjoyed it, and that it was worthwhile giving up TV watching time. And for those of you who are over the pond, I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day at work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye all.